You saw this a minute ago that Keontae George, Baylor commit, is among the McDonald's All-Americans, and yes, some former Jayhawk, or not former, future Jayhawks will be a part of that. That's on Matt Tate's timeline as well, who joins us from the Lawrence Journal World, covers Kansas basketball, among other things as well. David Smoak, Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak, Sikkim 365 Radio. Matt, how epic was that last night?
Yeah, that's the right word for it. Well, epic for every fan watching and absolute hell for every sports writer writing. I had KU with a 12-point lead with maybe six and some change to play, and so I was well on my way to an easy deadline night. It looked like they had that one not totally wrapped up, but they had led by double digits most of that second half once they got that lead. And then late it started slipping away, and I started writing a loss story. And then overtime was just no idea what was going to happen either way. So I was just trying to survive at that point, just like the two teams out there on the floor. But it was an amazing basketball game. It really was. Ochai Agbaji likened it to the Chiefs-Bills game from the night before in the playoffs, and basically saying that KU was kind of like the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes in that moment. Just got to get it to overtime, and at that point you got to find a way anyway to win, and he was a big part of that, but the whole team was. And what's crazy is that Texas Tech probably played even better than Kansas did. It was a lot like that Bills Chiefs game. It just was two really good teams slugging it out, nobody wanting to flinch, and at the end, obviously somebody has to have more points when it's all said and done, and Kansas found a way to be that team.
Ochai Agbaji clearly has come into his own this season, and when we talked to you before, he was kind of the guy who fixed some of the flaws he had in his game, and the offseason has taken a huge step. But it seems to me, and a friend of mine who's a KU grad sent this to me today, saying that everybody should be talking about Agbaji, but the KU fans are more concerned about why Remey Martin isn't playing as much yet. Do you think that that's about to turn around and that he might have wrapped his arms around the Bill Self way yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I just wrote a blog earlier today about that. I mean, it's Remey all the time around here, and I understand. You know, the guy has terrific potential and could be a difference maker if he's ever sort of unleashed. And it's taken some time, and then he had an injury that kind of slowed things down a little bit in there too, and he's still dealing with that a little bit. So. I think people are freaking out about it, but he's heading in the right direction. But it's going to take some time. I mean, this is a guy that's not even been with Bill Self yet for 6 months, and there are guys who come through Kansas for 4 years and don't figure out how to play Bill Self basketball and do it consistently. And so to ask a guy to do it in less than 6 months is a big ask. Remy's terrifically talented. He's all heart. He plays on emotion and adrenaline, and when he was out there last night, he was good. He was, he's not perfect. He still has to fix some things in his game, but effort, energy, intensity, those aren't issues. So, that's 2 games in a row. He's played 20 plus minutes, and I think everybody's freaking out about the minutes he didn't play, but I think that's a positive trend if you're wanting him out there more. The fact that the head coach has put him out there for that kind of PT in the last 2 games shows you that, okay, now it's up to him. He's getting the opportunity. Now he has to show that he can be consistent with it and reliable. And that's much easier said than done, but he still has some time. But yeah, they're a totally different team if he can break out.
Matt, with so much talk about Agbaji and also Remey Martin, who would you say is a player on the team that maybe isn't highlighted enough?
Well, 4 or 5 weeks ago, I would have said Christian Brown very easily. I mean, he was neck and neck through maybe 12 games, in my opinion, with Ochai as far as this team's MVP. Ochai's been their leading scorer all season and been that guy. But Christian Brown is one of those guys that'll fill up a stat sheet. I mean, he'll have assists, he'll have rebounds, he'll have the floor burns and the hustle plays and blocks and steals and all of that stuff. And he was phenomenal, and he's continued to play at a pretty high level. But I think the guy who's really emerged and who would be the answer right now is Jalen Wilson. Jalen was huge part of their team last year, a starter in his redshirt freshman season, really kind of emerged as a go-to guy last year in a lot of ways for that team. And this season took him a little time to get going. He had a rough first 10 games or so, and he was suspended for 3 of them because of a DUI in October. And, that kind of got obviously off to the wrong start there with that, and it was in his head, and he couldn't get out of his own head and all of those things. But here in the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's just been a much different player, more confident, more aggressive. He just attacks now. He goes to the glass. I mean, he said this a couple of games ago that after that suspension, he kind of came back thinking, okay, I got to do this for me, and I got to get me going, and I got to find a way to make up for this for me. And he said maybe 2-3 weeks ago, he finally realized, no, I'm just going to do this for my team now, and that's all that matters. And that's, again, you talk about the Bill Self way, right? That's number one on the list right there, team first. And so Jalen embraced that and kind of found his way to that point again, and that has coincided with him playing tremendous basketball on both ends. He's not a great defender yet, but he's a great rebounder, and that's part of defense. So he's been sensational, and that trio with Ochai and Christian Brown and Jalen Wilson, it's pretty tough. I mean, I know you guys had a really good one down there last year, and I've seen some other good trios. I don't want to put them on that level just yet, but it's as probably tough as there is right now in college basketball. So it gives Kansas a shot every night, and then after that, it's how do the rest of those guys perform, and again, consistency, toughness, all those things that you have to have from the rest of the lineup.
Matt, it's amazing to say this, but 94-91, of course, the game did go into double overtime, but the wave of defense, what Kansas throws at you, but your thoughts about Texas Tech and the wave of defense, but also they're relentless. We saw that in Waco. We've seen that. Kansas saw that in Lubbock. And what Mark Adams has right now.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. They have been, as long as he's been there. And when he was working for Chris Beard, he was a big part of their defense, of course. So, Self said it best last night. People don't do that to Texas Tech. I mean, Obagi went for 37 last night. And I actually, right before you guys called, I just looked it up because I'm working on a story kind of following up last night. And I looked it up to see who had the highest point total and what it was against Texas Tech this year heading into last night. And I'll be darned if it wasn't Ochai Agbaji himself down there in Lubbock. He had 24 in that game, so he outdoes that by 13 at home, and he was much better here. A lot of those points in Lubbock were kind of garbage catch up, down double digits. Let's just try to chuck it up there. Last night was not that. I mean, he was a man possessed and took over, and he just looks really good. But again, against that defense to put up a night like that, I can't remember exactly what he's shot against Tech now. I have it here somewhere though, but he's 20 of 35 this year against that defense, 13 of 21 from 3-point range. I mean, and Adam said after the game too, we were trying to keep the ball out of his hands. We were trying everything we could, and it still didn't work. So that's not a knock on that defense. Those guys are phenomenal, and they make you earn every inch, and have for years. And he's got them playing great. And that I think that to me sort of underscores just how good Agbaji was last night. I mean, he hit the one big shot. If he doesn't make the one big three that ties it at the end of the first overtime, his night's pretty darn good, but it wouldn't have mattered as much, right? And I don't think anybody would be oohing and ahhing over it. And now you look at that, and he's got a chance to be in that Player of the Year conversation nationally. Mm-hmm. If he ends up winning it, you're going to look back at this game and think, boy, that might have been sort of the biggest night of the whole thing. So massive, massive effort. And then, his reward is, let's see, Kentucky on Saturday, and then 2 Iowa State, and then Baylor and Texas after that. So enjoy your off days here, Ochai, because it doesn't get any easier anytime soon.
But is that thing that maybe he did in the offseason more than anything else, just understand that give me the ball and I'll take care of it?
Yeah, he went to the combine. He flirted with the draft and was really close to leaving. And when he got up there to the pre-draft combine in Chicago, I mean, that's what they told him. You have to assert yourself more. And he heard it, I think he told me just once. And he said, that's all I needed to hear one time, because he knew that about himself. He's a very smart kid. He knew that was a weakness of his. There were a lot of games, even though he's been a terrific player at Kansas and really filled an important role on some really good teams, in those moments where they maybe needed him to be a scoring threat or be the guy, there were a lot of times where he would sort of fade to the background, and it just wasn't his time, and he wasn't prepared for that. And so, going to that combine, seeing what that was about, hearing that feedback, and then just just working. I mean, Self said last night that Ochai still puts in the most amount of work on this team in every drill. He's the hardest worker. Every time he shoots, he's the hardest shooter. I mean, he preps everything relentlessly. His release point, his elevation, his angles. I mean, you watch him before these games, and he's one of the first ones out there, if not the first one. And it's a really strict routine, a pregame routine that he has, and it doesn't look like much fun. It sort of looks like when you're trying to learn how to play the piano and you're doing scales. You know, it's boring. You want to play music. You don't want to do the scales, but he's out there going through those scales, and obviously when the lights come on and it's game time, then he plays a pretty sweet song. And you know, but that's what it is. I mean, he put in the work, and he has for his whole career, but he definitely took it to a different level this summer and preseason, and I think early on, I mean, he scored 29 in the opener against Michigan State in the Champions Classic, and that was big for his confidence. That showed him, you know, that he could believe in himself and that he could be that guy. And I think from there, he's just continued to become more and more confident, and also more and more of, you know, like you just said, give me the ball. And any big moment, any big shot that they've had to have this year, it's going to him. I mean, you basically have to tackle him to keep the ball away from him. And, you know, so far they've gotten it to him, and he's delivered darn near every time. So, you know, like I said, one of the nicest, best kids that I've ever covered or been around. And so it's really easy to look out there and watch what he's doing and be so happy for him, because he's a terrific young man, and he's got a great family, and you know, he's waited his time, and he was patient, and boy, he's making it count now.
Matt, we know the deal Kansas for years and years. I mean, you kind of just go ahead and, hey, they're going to be the Big 12 champs, and recently that's changed a little bit, but they're still in pretty much the same spot, just a little bit more competition. How would you size up this current Big 12 landscape 1 to 10 versus past years covering this conference?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, Self says it every year that this is the best the league's ever been, and so you kind of you kind of roll your eyes when you hear it every time, because number one, of course, he's going to say that, but I also believe him every time I hear it. You know, I don't think he's just blowing smoke. I think he genuinely means it when he says it, and he's a big fan of the league, of course. And but boy, it sounded different when he said it this year, and I think it is different. I mean, this is, you know, it's not going to happen, but you could make a case for 10 teams to go to the tournament, and it won't happen. They won't do that, and these teams will probably beat each other up too much along the way to get all 10 in, but if they could get 8 in, I think that's a very realistic possibility. And as Self pointed out last night, you know, KU got everything they could possibly want from K-State over the weekend, and he said that first half of that game, when K-State was up 16 at the break, he said that team we played in the first half was a top 20 team. You know, so that's the very bottom end of this thing. And of course, everybody kind of thought Iowa State was going to be at the bottom, and they're ranked, and they're talented, and they're, you know, this close to being, you know, a 1 or 2 loss team in the conference instead of the losses they do have, but they've all been close, and they've been in every game. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, it's sort of a cliche to say the no nights off thing. I think people use that all the time, but it really is true this year. And sometimes you get those nights off, you know, even in a good year for the conference, you get those nights off maybe when a team's coming to your place, right? But I don't think that'll be the case. I mean, you know, KU blew out West Virginia a couple of weeks ago, but it was a 2-point game at halftime, and it was a dogfight. You know, they just caught fire in the second half, and West Virginia ran out of gas and just couldn't do anything. But even that, you know, it looks like an easy win on paper, but there was nothing easy about it. And so I think that'll continue to be the theme. And I absolutely love the way the schedule's set up. I mean, didn't know Texas Tech was going to be quite so good. Obviously didn't know Iowa State was going to do what they're doing. But when you looked at this thing before the season started, when the schedule came out, and you saw Kansas playing Baylor and Texas twice after February 5th, basically between February 5th and March 5th. That's a heck of a sprint to the finish right there, having to play those 4 games. And obviously it goes both ways for the other 2 teams as well. So I think it's going to come down to it. I think KU's been gritty here to win these games that they've won the last couple of weeks. And you know, a lot of confidence has come from that. I think they believe they can win any game, any situation, anywhere right now. And so that probably is going to help them in those tighter games. But they still have to beat some pretty good teams to come out on top of this thing, and whoever wins it is going to have to do the same thing. So I think it comes down to that last week, and I hope it does. That makes it the most fun to cover.
Matt, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Great stuff, Lawrence. Journal World. The only team we know in the Big 12 that won't make the NCAA or postseason is Oklahoma State because of that NCAA ruling. And then everybody else trying to scratch 9 teams into maybe 8 or so. And it says a lot. Again, Iowa State is 2-5 in the conference and yet ranked number 23 in the country. And that's greatness. All right, when we come back, Carlos Silva, Jr.